now, and recanting these things, recounting them rather, excuse me, isn't a big deal in that it's not embarrassing, it's not going to shock me, it's not making me uncomfortable.
Mhm.
I know I'm saying contradictory things there, but that's what this process is like. Sometimes exhilarating, sometimes it's boring. You know, sometimes it's lots of fun. Sometimes it's like pulling a tooth.
Right, right. So, I mean, it's one thing to sort of be, interviewed on TV, or in this kind of format that we're doing, but
Hmm.
one of the nice things about a book is that it's a really intimate and sort of unique relationship and conversation between a writer and a reader, and one that you're developing over a number of pages, and the reader is going to be spending a lot of time with you. So, was that interesting for you to tell your story in written form versus being on TV again and saying the same things you've had to say before? Did the book give you a chance to sort of open up a little bit?
Well, of course it did, but I was really helped a lot because while I was in the penitentiary, I kept a journal. I've got over 1,000 pages of personal thoughts and insights and dreams and aspirations and whatnot. And a great deal of this book was me going back and reviewing my journal. And of course, you can imagine in that kind of time frame, you forget things. And you have a lot of those moments where it's, oh yeah, I remember that now. And so that because this format puts you in the author's head, and you're sharing intimately with the reader, that was a big plus for me to have my journal to refer to, and it really put me in the moment sometimes.
Yeah. And so, while you were incarcerated, did you write every day, or how did that work for you?
No, I didn't. I noticed that sometimes it would depend obviously on what was going on, and there were times when I would wait until there was something to write about, because the penitentiary is nothing if not monotony. It's repetition, boredom, routine. Um, Not unlike combat, it's interspersed with moments of absolute terror and excitement. So, um, writing every day didn't pan out. I thought about that, but there was just nothing to write about. You end up doing one of those boring, got up at 6, 8, went to rec, went to work. It just gets really gray, and nobody wants to read that.
Right,
So I
right.
tried to write things that were at least interesting to me at the time, and hopefully later on interesting to others. In fact, I wrote it not with the idea that someday I would publish it, but I wrote my journal with the idea that someday my son would ask me about the penitentiary, and I would just drop this thing in his lap and said, "That's what it was like."
Hmm.
And so,
And has your son read the book yet?
yes, he has. When I got I guess you could say, a final first draft, I sent it to him because I wanted him to have not just a heads up, but I wanted his approval. I didn't want to write anything that was going to embarrass him or make him uncomfortable, or write something on there that he would say, "Oh my God, why did you write that?" And the relationship that we share is pretty important to me, so I wanted to make sure that he was on board.
Right. And
He,
did you have to? Oh, go ahead.
I said he is on board, by the way.
Okay. Oh, good. Good. And so you had these journal notes. Did you have to go and consult like court archives or anything sort of official so you would get all the facts straight, or?
Occasionally, I would pull up, in addition, it wasn't just my memory. We would pull up court records. There were transcripts and there were official documents, and sometimes I would even pull up like a newspaper article, get a quote from like a prosecutor or something. Even reviewed. It was very helpful when we made the documentary. There was a fair amount of archival news footage, and I got to because I was involved so much with the editing process of the film, I got to review some of that, and I could get some things nailed down a little bit better. So it wasn't just a single medium that I was dealing with. I was all over the place, talking to people, looking at documents, even old news footage, newspaper articles, and even talked to a couple of attorneys.
Right. Well, you mentioned that you know this book could be very useful for anybody going through a trial, but you know a lot of readers will not have done that. So what would you hope for the average reader to take away from the book?
Well, I hope we're not missing. Maybe I wasn't real clear. When I said trial, I didn't mean like a legal court trial.
Just any sort of like spiritual trial.
Spiritual, physical, emotional. One of the most influential things I read inside, like I mentioned before, Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. And even though I wasn't in a Nazi concentration camp, there are a lot of universals about incarceration. And Frankl talks about not just the fact that he was in a prison camp, but about the ordeals that everybody goes through. And if you're in your 20s, your ordeal may be struggling in college, or break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and it doesn't much matter because when I say it doesn't matter, what doesn't matter was what the ordeal is, because every ordeal is immediate and personal and catastrophic for that individual. And that's what I was referring to, is that my ordeal, well, I tell you what, just as Viktor Frankl's ordeal was much more severe than mine was a little longer duration, but I got a lot of information, a lot of encouragement, a lot of insight from reading Frankl's horror story. Mine is something like that, though less than Frankl's, it might be more than somebody else's. And this is sort of like a hierarchical chain, you might call it, and people can learn from it, or at least that's my hope.
Yeah. And did you come across Frankl's writing in prison?
Yes, I did. There are hours upon hours and days upon.
And what was that like?
Please continue. What?
Oh, I just wonder what it was like for you, sort of coming across somebody. I mean, it must have felt like there was somebody who was kind of speaking to you while you were in prison.
Absolutely. There are great writers out there, and with that much time, there's very limited access to the outside world. And finding somebody like Frankl, Solzhenitsyn, there are some great writers out there, and I was fortunate enough to at least have access to some of it, and I got really, really lucky when I got my master's in literature and was exposed to even more.
So, Kirkus, we have a pretty bookish audience, I guess you could say. So it seems right to ask you, who are some other writers who you admire?
Oh my. I absolutely hold in very high regard Cormac McCarthy. I like John Irving. It's funny because your moods change, and in one season you might be just a Stephen King fanatic, and at another time you might go for the most highbrow literary. I only read Tolstoy now.
Right.
And I think it helped a lot because I was also reading a fair amount of The New Yorker and The Atlantic Monthly for a while, and they pointed me in an interesting direction a lot of times.
Right.
It's weird. Those seasons you might go from the classics to the most pulp detective genre stuff you can imagine. But it is amazing. In almost every genre, if you look hard enough, there is quality work out there. There are guys writing private eye books that are superb writers, and there are also obviously the giants out there that everybody knows.
Right. Well, you're a pretty literary guy. Did you? I mean, even before you knew that you would get out, I mean, you were keeping the journal, obviously, but did you always want to write a book about your experience?
No, I didn't. After I read John Irving, I think the first one of his books I read was The Whirling Cord and a Garp. Back when it came out, I was before I went to prison. and a little thing in the back of my head says, that would, the way that guy writes, that would be a great thing to do. That would be fun. That would be a way to go. And I've got, I don't know, 4 or 5 novels upstairs in boxes that will probably never see the light of day. But I tried my hand at novel writing, and who knows? If I've learned nothing, I've learned that anything can happen. But this was the opportunity that I had, and like I say, I had some reasons to do this memoir. So I guess the two came together.
Yeah. Well, your life is kind of defined by this experience, but it'd be great to see you publish some novels that have nothing to do with it. That'd be a really nice thing to see.
Not everybody wants to be known by the worst thing that ever happened to them, but I am sort of blessed in the same way, in an odd kind of way, because while this is the worst thing that ever happened to me, it's also the best. This changed me for the better. I'm a much better person than I was before. This has been a seminal event in my life, not just going to prison, but getting out. And it has given me appreciation for things and people and places that I don't think I ever would have had before. And I can be completely comfortable in my skin, whether I'm talking to the President of the United States or a guy on the street corner trying to bum a few bucks. After living in there, nothing really rattles me anymore. I guess I'm very, very lucky in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Well, let me ask you one question. I noticed that Barry Scheck wrote the sort of foreword, and I was wondering if, because when we air the video, we'd like to let the Innocence Project know and hope that they would do some social media just to get the word out about the interview. Do you know of anybody who would, at the Innocence Project, who would help us kind of get the word out? And I mean, you can send me the contact over email, but
I will do that. Yeah, Paul Cates. He's the media guy, and he would be very good at this.
Okay, great.
CATES. Yeah.
Okay,
I'll do that as soon as we finish.
Okay, great. Well, that would just help us get the word out. And as I said, we felt like you did a great job on the book, and congrats on your first book. And thanks for making some time for us today.
Hey, thank you for what you're doing. It always helps. Trust me.
Right.
I'm brand new at this, and nobody knows me.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, have a good day.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.